So it's been almost 2 years since this truck has run. So now it's time to see if we can make it run again. Not yet. Okay, so we have no communication with the ECM. So let's start looking for some fuses or wires or something like that. So after a little bit of searching, found a few broken wires. This one completely severed, a couple nicked ones, and this one's severed inside but didn't break the coating. So I got, looks like 5 wires here to repair. So I'm going to repair these and so to continue our no start saga, after I repaired those wires, I plugged the scanner back in. I still had no communication. So it was time to break out the heavy artillery. Wiring diagrams and a scope. Check and make sure all of our wires are good. Make sure all my inputs are good. Make sure I have all my powers and grounds. I did find I was missing some powers. Found a bad fuse, changed that, still nothing. So I started checking all the wires. Everything was good. I basically had a bad computer. I had everything going in, nothing coming out. I originally thought I might run into this. I didn't trust this little dent here on the back of the computer. It wasn't too shocking that it wouldn't start or this might be bad. But in searching for the bad wires, I did find that the 2 wires that happened to short themselves together, one was a 5-volt reference and the other was a power supply for the glow plugs. So you can imagine what happens when you have high voltage going through a 5-volt system. This becomes a paperweight, and that's exactly what it is now. So I have the other computer from the parts truck, and I'm just gonna have somebody come out and program it. I don't have the software to program it here, so they'll come out, they'll do it here. But in the meantime, I'm gonna change the top wiring harness for the engine, mainly because the plug that goes into the ECM is smashed, so I would have to change it anyway. And to change all these pins, it's probably going to take me about an hour, and it's a real pain. If you've ever done one of these, you understand why I don't want to do it. Not to mention, my other harness has 4 or 5 repaired wires, whatever it was. So if I take a little extra time and put this entire harness in, which probably about the same amount of time I would spend, I'll be back to an OEM harness. No splices, good plugs. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull the airbox out for like the 3rd time. This is the aftermarket airbox from the parts truck. I'll pull the baffle off the top. Disconnect the air charge cooler. Pull off some of the wiring harness clips, unplug the top of the harness, and now the glow plug module. Now we're going to pull the throttle body off. The wiring harness routes right underneath it, so it's easier to just take it off and get it out of the way. Unplug some of the injectors we can get to from the top. Now we're down on the right wheel well. We'll pull the glow plug wires off. I have to remove the fuel filter housing because the wiring harness goes behind it. There's actually a bolt behind it that holds the wiring harness in. That's just a bolt that holds the harness down.
Unplug a couple more injectors. Now we're on the driver's side wheel well. Unplug our glow plugs, unscrew them. Fish the wiring harness up. Back up on the top, unplug the wiring harness, fish it out of there. Don't yank on it. Those plugs get caught on everything. I'll fish the other side out. And put our new one in. We're just going to set it down about where it goes before we bolt it down or start plugging anything in. Sometimes you got to pull it back out and reroute it if you don't have it right the first time. So you just kind of set it close to where it goes, get everything where it belongs, and then start finalizing it. Route it under the throttle body and down the passenger side. Put the throttle body back on. I like to get the motor closed up as soon as possible so no debris can get in there. Put our air charge cooler back on there. Put our upper baffle on. Now we're back in the wheel well. Route our harness and put our glow plugs back in. Or at least the wires to the glow plugs. Screw our harness back down. Tighten our fuel filter down. Put our air tube back in. Plug in all of our sensors.
Okay, let's see if my diagnosis was correct. It's not going to start, but we can at least see if the scanner communicates. And it does. So, our computer was fried. So after they program it, hopefully, we'll give it another shot and see if it starts. But I've gone as far as I can go today. Okay, so we got our ECM programmed with the correct VIN number. Unfortunately, the technician that programmed it was not able to get the truck to start. He had it cranking, but it wouldn't fire. He told me that the fuel pump wasn't running because there were a bunch of codes in the ECM from modules that needed to be changed, the ABS module, the trailer brake module, and the fuel pump module, because he wasn't able to program the VIN number into those, and all those codes were shutting off the ECM. I said that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I still think it should start. Just throw some communication codes. I said it's probably something more like if you have no fuel pressure, it's probably got air in the system because I had all the fuel lines off. I don't think he wanted to hear my diagnosis because he got a little upset and proceeded to tell me that he had been a dealer technician at GM for 18 years and he's seen this a lot. So I said, okay, just leave it. I'll take care of it when I get here. So I got here and decided to try my diagnosis first. I bled the fuel system. There was a bunch of air in the system. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm not saying I won't have to change those modules, but I think it'll start without changing. So we're going to find out who's right. The GM technician with 18 years experience or the regular old car mechanic that works on rusty pieces of junk. It has been almost 2 years since this truck has run. My truck was speaking Spanish. So now I think our next plan of attack is change out those modules that don't have their correct VIN number, whatever is not communicating with our scanner here. Clear everything, see what comes back, and whatever comes back, we'll work on that next. So I changed all the modules. The ABS module, I didn't change the whole thing. You can change just the electronics by taking out the 4 bolts. It's pretty easy. So I changed that out. I changed our fuel pump module and our trailer brake control module. So all of our modules are good. Unfortunately, I have some codes that won't go away. And those are for some EGR related items. Coolant bypass solenoid and the EGR solenoid itself. So we're gonna go and diagnose that right now. So here's our codes. We had a P0405 and a P2494. One is EGR position sensor and one is EGR coolant bypass position sensor. Both of these have about 7 pages of diagnostics, but I still went through it because I don't like to guess. I determined that both sensors are bad, the EGR and the coolant bypass. Coincidentally, the wires that were shorted from before, that 5-volt reference, went to both of those. So in addition to frying the computer, I believe it fried both of our sensors. So now we're gonna have to replace those. And I took the one off the parts truck. This is the EGR valve, and whatever's in here is fried. It'll make a nice paperweight with my old ECM. So we're gonna have to change this out. So our EGR valve isn't too bad to get out of our parts truck motor that's sitting on a pallet, but to get it out of the motor that's in the truck, it's kind of a little bit of a pain. Now, my EGR is good, it's just the electronics that are bad. So I'm thinking I'm gonna take this cover off and see what's inside. If there's something in here that I can change easily, or if it's just this cover, then I think I'm gonna swap them out. I already found a new EGR valve, well, I used one online for 50 bucks. So if I do destroy this one, it's not a huge deal. People do EGR deletes on these things all the time. So there's lots of these floating around. That was pretty simple. Got some electronics here. Not sure what's fried. Looks like a position sensor here. Doesn't want to come off and I don't want to break it, so we're going to leave that on there. It should be fine. Got a motor here. That's it. That's the extent of the electronics in here. So I think I'm going to swap this over on the EGR valve. And if it gets rid of my codes, I think I might do this on the bypass valve. Okay, so it worked. All of our codes are gone. And in case you were wondering what I was avoiding, there's the EGR valve. This is the easy part to get to. There's only 6 bolts, not that bad. But it was much easier to change that cover. However, the bypass valve, way down there. So after I got the EGR bypass valve and the EGR valve changed over, we got no codes there. Check engine lights out. So since we're getting rid of lights and codes, let's move on to our airbag. These could not be easier to install. Put the safety in. It's all done. Of course, disconnect the battery before servicing the airbag, unless you like living dangerously. So let me hook the battery back up, see if that gets rid of our airbag light. Every time I disconnect the battery, it starts speaking Spanish again. Well, we got no airbag light. Check the codes just to make sure. Okay. We're out of codes, we're out of lights. It must be done for the night. So I made this video to show you guys a little bit of what you can expect in some of these rebuilds. Not necessarily all these problems at once, but there are always complications. Nothing ever goes smoothly. And I don't normally show this kind of stuff because I'm usually showing the bodywork side of it. This is actually what I do during the day. I am a mechanic, so this stuff was easy for me. Now, I actually thought that this thing was going to start when I turned the key. I was a little disappointed when it didn't start. I thought I'd at least get something. A crank, no start, but no, just a click. That's all I got. And I didn't know what was wrong. It could have been anything. A pin that I bent in one of the many plugs I disconnected. It could have been a plug I forgot to reconnect. It could have been something caused from the accident, or multiple things caused from the accident, which it was. Which brings me to answer everybody's question of why I did not delete the EGR and DEF stuff. Right now, the truck is stock, and I have factory wire diagrams, the factory programming, and scan tools that I can use to tell me where my problems are and guide me down a path. If I start customizing stuff by changing any of that, I add more variables to the ones I already had. Plus, I don't have the same resources to track down any problems that I have. So it's kind of like if this truck was a 1,000-piece puzzle and I'm putting it together, it's hard, but I have a box top I can look at that kind of guides me along. When I start adding stuff, it's like throwing that box top away. I have no more guide, still have the same problem. And throwing in some pieces from another puzzle just to complicate things further. So yeah, it would have saved me a lot of time to delete all that stuff if I knew I had a running truck, but I didn't. So I chose to take it down this path, and I'm glad I did. The last thing I wanted was more headache. And this was a tough one because as soon as you fix one problem, that just leads you to the next problem. So I had to fix multiple ones before I actually got the result I wanted, which was a running truck. I still have a parasitic draw, which I'll worry about it when the truck is all together, but as everyone knows, that is every mechanic's nightmare, and I'll deal with it later. Right now, we'll just leave the battery disconnected when we park it and figure it out some other time. I'll let you know what that is when I find it. But now it's going to be off to the body shop. We'll let the body guys do the body work and the paint guys do the paint work before I get it back and I put it back together. I might delete the EGR stuff and the DEF stuff, or I might leave that for the new owner. I plan on keeping this truck for myself, but I have 3 buyers that are very serious, and if I can make some money, the truck has to go. It's business. I can't keep everything. And it gives me a chance to move on to the next truck. More videos for you guys to watch. More mistakes, more problems. Maybe. We'll find out. So like this video if you found it interesting. Share it if you think somebody else might. Subscribe if you want to see more of this build, some of my other builds, or my tutorials. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.